Hi, I'm Shauna Unger, co-founder of Allen Unger.
And I'm April Allen. I'm the other co-founder of Allen Unger.
And we are passionate about helping leaders and teams navigate and perform effectively in a world of growing change and difference, which is why we're here today to talk to you about why a new leadership approach is needed. And so one of the key things that we wanted to share today is around the fact that old leadership styles really are not effective in today's world. What we see is that there's innovation and strategy and a variety of things that are put into products or delivery systems. And yet when it comes to people and people management, leadership strategies, many times it's just taking out the old ways of doing things that are now ineffective.
Yeah, they're antiquated. To be more blunt, they just don't really work with this new generation coming into the workforce. And for some people, that is hard to reckon with and reconcile. They're just like, no, this is how it's always been, or this is what drove me. And a lot of times we find ourselves having those conversations around the new generations that are coming in the workforce and their values versus the baby boomers' values, frankly.
Yeah. And we see over and over again, I think, that what worked for a baby boomer generation where, things didn't need to be explicitly expressed or talked about are not necessarily effective for the incumbent generations that we're seeing in the workforce. And we're seeing in many ways, individuals that are in these executive roles that maybe are in that generation that, one, maybe don't want to give up their position, and two, don't want to give up their style of doing things. And yet we see over and over again that it's exacerbating the workforce and it's not really leveraging the talent that they have. It's not getting the best out of their people in the way that they really could. And again, we see innovations, whether it's in AI, different technology, but when people think about leading people, they go back to these old structures that just don't work. And so we're really seeking to have leaders think about innovation, think about leading in a different way when it comes to leading their staff, leading their people, how they even embody leadership.
Yeah, you always say leadership's a contact sport. And that is one of my favorite sayings of yours because it's like it helps you think of football or even basketball. Well,
although we shouldn't really be, but I hear you saying.
You know what I'm saying? Though, leadership is a contact sport. Let's even think of the coach that's leading a football team. They still have contact. Very few coaches, if you look on the sidelines, are like, don't touch their guy, their quarterback, their running back. Don't get close to them and say, this is how we're going to run this play. Or what do you think about this play? Do you think? So it's still a contact sport, right? And so a lot of leaders from that old school generations, they don't want to have contact. They're like, you go figure it out. You got it. Just put your head down and do your work. And that does not work. I have not seen that work in any of our clients or any across generations of the work that I've done or been a part of or companies I've been a part of. I've not seen that work. And sometimes they get stuck in that style. And I'm always puzzled, like, why don't you want to change?
Yeah. I think you and I see a dynamic too, where it used to be when somebody who was a technical expert got promoted, you could still kind of make that work. Maybe they were really good within a technical engineering space, or I worked in healthcare forever. And so somebody who was a strong clinician would get promoted into leadership.
You see that a lot. I mean, I worked in Silicon Valley for quite a bit of time, and you would see folks that had subject matter expertise that would go, okay, I have this great wealth of knowledge in the engineering space usually, and but I'm not great at managing people. And so I always had a great respect for organizations that had a subject matter expert track. So when you have that 2-track system, which is something that we both believe in strongly, but I really believe in that strongly, of saying, hey, everybody can't lead people. Just because you're good at widgets or creating things don't mean you're good at creating people, leaders, even employees. So Yeah, we do see that. And sometimes that's just the default. Okay, now you're gonna manage people. And what I found is a lot of those people that have gotten, I say, stuck in those management roles, they don't even really want them. They just want the promotion, they want the money, they want the positional power, but not necessarily the people that they have to lead.
Yeah. And you and I really work with organizations to think about potentially, especially if that's their book of business, to think about two tracks so that you don't have an individual who is technically proficient moving into a people leader role when that's not really their heart. And then likewise, if you're going to be growing people leaders, really think about, are we equipping them for the core fundamental of the job, which is the leadership? How do you reward? How do you recognize? How do you engage?
How do you create psychological safety?
Yeah.
That's a huge part of leadership development, and having that skill's huge now. It's not just the nicety or, oh, isn't that cute? That's just something like Gen Z and millennials, young millennials, come in and expect psychological safety. They talk about it all the time. How many times have we heard people say, well, I don't feel psychologically safe. I don't feel safe. Now, sometimes we're not going to have the safety we're going to have, obviously, if we are with our friends or our family. That is not the kind of safety you're going to necessarily have at work. But it is incumbent on a leader to create an environment where folks can come from different backgrounds and thrive. People can have different lived experiences and opinions and look like me, look like you, and be just fine in the organization and have a fair chance to move up in the organization by being themselves. So,
yeah. And I think creating that safety is so vital and so important. And one of the things that we're also seeing is with our economy, with budgets being super tight, organizations feeling challenged in terms of how do we reward and recognize staff when the bonuses may not be what they were 2 years ago, 5 years ago.
well, I'll tell you what not to do. Not to throw a pizza party. So I have to say, one of my dear friends who's an executive at a major organization said, you need to help folks not think pizza parties are the way to go when we are grown folks who can afford our own pizza and Taco Tuesday and everything else. They're like, no. Yeah. And what we were talking about, I was talking about with her was, sponsorship opportunities, because there are still folks that are, especially in that millennial group, that are like, hey, I'm willing to stick with the company. That Gen X millennial group, I'm willing to stick with the company. I'm willing not to get as much pay that I could go out and get somewhere else once we get through this economic downturn. But I need to see that you're also investing in me and believe in me.
So talk about, what do you mean when you say sponsorship? If somebody's like, what is a sponsorship within an organization?
Practically speaking, some of the sponsorships look like, and some that we've helped implement it, but I've even helped implement it in other organizations, are ones where you have senior leaders that are tenured, that are able to understand the landscape of the organization, both economically, organizationally, operationally. And they're able to take somebody who's a younger talent and say, hey, I see that you have something to offer us, right? It's not just about what we're offering you, but you have something to offer us. And we do have something to offer you. And so we do want to help you understand the organization better so that you may see yourself here in 10 years as being one of the, having my job, frankly, having their job. And so it is really taking that time with the person or a group of people that you see have high potential. They're good at their jobs. They're offering something unique in the organization, and taking time to help them understand the business better, and taking time to just offer some level of mentorship. But one level up is really putting them in areas and groups in the business that they may need to be exposed to, and folks in the business that they may need to be exposed to move to the next level in the organization.
Yeah, that is so key. I mean, we affectionately may refer to it as a ride along, bringing them into a meeting that they wouldn't normally be in.
Yes.
Having a seat at the table and getting that experience where they don't normally get that experience. Now, we also know for Gen Z and some millennials especially,
don't want that.
they may not want the seat at the table because they don't want your job.
Yeah.
They don't want that
And
executive role.
And we talk about that a lot. We talk about that, and we've seen that a lot. We've
Yeah.
seen that where we have offered, when we're in organizations, have said, hey, we see potential in you. Would you like to be exposed? I've
No thanks.
They're like, no ma'am, no ham, no turkey. I don't want that. Like, I don't want that for my life.
I don't want your job.
I don't want your job. I don't want their job. They look miserable. That's not what I want. So, there is definitely that in the workspace in place now where there are folks that are like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to rise to the cream of the crop. I just want a nice job that has work-life balance and I have boundaries, right? And so, but I think that also means you have to have a conversation with folks.
Right.
That people don't want to have a conversation. They want to make decisions without actually sitting down and having a conversation with what's going to be best for you. Mm-hmm. What does sponsorship even mean for you? Because it may not mean going to the top of the company.
Yeah. And that's, I think, the piece that we see. You and I are really passionate about, well, and the research bears it out as well, that difference of perspective, lens, lived experience, identity, those really do bring innovation and better performance for organizations. And the world is growing more and more different, which is good news. Mm-hmm. The challenge is it does require leadership that doesn't make assumptions, doesn't assume we're all vanilla, doesn't assume that everybody's
I'm chocolate
motivated and your motivations are different than mine or different than someone else's. And so it does require us to sit down, ask those questions, engage with the folks that we're leading in terms of what is going to be rewarding to them. And it may surprise you. It may be something that isn't going to necessarily require you to open up the checkbook. Maybe it's flexibility on work schedule.
Flexibility is huge for folks, right? I know I've led folks who are like, hey, I just want to be able to start earlier and leave earlier. Is that possible? I'm like, well, actually, that is possible. If it's you're not infringing or impeding work, you're able to do your job. Sure, go ahead. If that's going to make you a better worker and feel valued, we talk a lot about that in some of our own trainings that we've created. What do folks want? What do people really want to feel from their workforce, right? And from their work and from their leaders.
Yeah.
Rather.
And I think, back to our opening, it really is time for organizations to ask themselves, do they have the right leaders in roles? Do they have leaders that are threatened by that concept, who want to keep doing it the way they've always done it, or to position themselves with a cadre of leaders, regardless of age, but who are willing to do
different? I mean, and that is hitting a nerve.
I can tell.
Because, that is something that we have dealt with from past clients, from past, folks. They do not want to do it differently. And what's funny are the people that pride themselves on innovation or equity. Yeah. And they don't really want to do things differently. They're like, no, this is how it's always worked. And we're like, no, the workforce has changed. Mm-hmm. And so I think you hit that nerve because we've seen folks who are like, we don't want to change. And you're like, well, then you're going to get left behind.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to get left behind. Not even just left behind. The lawyer hat's going to go on. You might get sued because there's some things that you do have to do differently than you were doing before. So,
and the good news is people still have a desire to perform, do a good job. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of getting leaders in place who know how to create belonging and bring out the best in their staff.
Yeah. Okay, the next topic we want to discuss today is bringing your whole self to work. There is so much confusion around this verbiage, this nomenclature. Folks do not know what it means. And when I say we hear this all the time, depending on from who, different feelings spill out about this term, but it's about bringing your whole self to work or bringing your authentic self to work. So what I decided to do was to look up, what does that mean from AI? Because I'm just curious, what is the definition that is being thrown out there to multiple people? And what it says is bringing your authentic self to work means showing up as your genuine self, including your unique talents, values, and perspectives, while maintaining professional boundaries. It encourages honesty, vulnerability, and genuine connection, which can increase trust, creativity, and engagement. But I think the key here is professional boundaries. What does that mean? Because depending on what generation you come from, and remember there's 5, as we know, in the workspace in place, that can look very differently.
Yeah, and I think the key to professional boundaries is defining that for your organization. And it's more than just, I've been in HR for so long that, when folks thought about professional, they were really thinking about what's the dress code? Can we have casual Fridays? Can you wear open-toed shoes? I'm really aging myself.
Yeah, I'm like,
But that's where they really focused on defining professionalism. And now what we're really seeing is the need to be explicit and to define for your organization what professionalism is going to look like. And it's back to that being willing to be explicit, explain things that maybe you didn't think you needed to explain. Because you have a generation that is used to sharing
everything.
A lot more on social media with their friends, even with their parents. It's
true. You like to let me know my kids share a lot. You're like, are they really telling you this? They are. I'm laughing because I'm thinking about an employee I had, and you know them. And I got a call from someone else who said they showed up with their do-rag on and they were in the bed at a professional meeting. And I had to call them and say, friend, can we not do that? Yeah. Like, that's not how we're going to show up with a professional meeting. And I would prefer you not to show that up like that with me either, really, because you're out here with the T-shirt on. You might forget you're at work, right? Because we're working remotely so much right now, right? And like, you always hear me say, you don't want me to bring my full self to work.
Right.
You don't want me to show up in my bonnet with a bad attitude and have it, and with coffee breath and not caring all the time. That's not how you want to bring your best professional self to work. And I think even if we switched that wording a bit, bring your authentic professional self to work, I don't know. People may not like that, but I think there's definitely some confusion in that.
Yeah. And it's going to really depend on your industry, on your book of business, the clients or the customer base that you have, and also being willing to test that. We also know that professionalism can be nomenclature for doing things in a certain way that may be antiquated, to use a term you use a lot. So for businesses to feel free to define that and understand they need to define that for their staff, but also to challenge themselves that the things that maybe they were comfortable with 10 years ago can be expanded.
Yeah. No, I think that's good because you just hit on something that's another key thing we deal with. It's around professionalism, right? And we just had someone say to us, hey, I don't use that word anymore. We've had leaders say that to us. Well, we don't use it, but we know it's in the zeitgeist of an organization. Still, folks have a very linear or binary way of thinking of professionalism. So, as you like to point out, it used to be that kind of affable white guy that came out after World War II and was kind of like, work hard. I value certain things in my work, and that's part of my identity and how I show up in the world. And professionalism doesn't always translate that way for other communities and other groups of people, right? As a woman, the way I show up looks differently than as how a man shows up. And that needs to be accepted and just fine and welcomed because I'm not a man and I'm not going to show up like a man. I'm not white. I'm not going to show up as a white woman, right? And so sometimes, and even my girlfriends that are Black women that are professionals, high executives are like, I'm not going to show up like that. And a lot of them have been reprimanded for being a little bit different, for being a little bit more direct in their communication style, or maybe they dress a little bit, they may want to put on a pair of leopard shoes, and folks are like, well, you're intimidating, or your communication's too direct. And so I want folks to still use professionalism in the way in which can be helpful if they define it.
Right.
And act like, because when that leader said to us, I don't use it anymore. I'm like, that's great, but people in your organization are.
Yeah.
And so we need to define what that looks like. And then we can form policies around that.
Yeah. And for that younger generation as well, for them to have a sense that, when you're at work sharing everything about your private life, about your personal life, about your views on any given topic, maybe something that needs to not be done in an inauthentic way, but having a sense of time and place. Because you really do want to have a work environment where folks from different backgrounds and perspectives can work through, can be able to accept and engage with each other, but also not spend so much time on the sphere that exists outside of work that it becomes a distraction, that it becomes a place of tension. And again, it comes back to setting that context, defining it, and then really working with your teams to be able to have a sense of what that is and what is the environment that you want to intentionally create so that your whole team can thrive.
Yeah.
One of the dynamics that we are seeing more and more within a world of change and a world of difference is a growing era of conflict within the workplace. And we get called in to help organizations both equip leaders to navigate conflict, but also to work with teams who are experiencing conflict. And I think, April, you and I will see often that when people reach out to us for this work, they will describe it as personal conflict, interpersonal conflict. John and Jane are in conflict. They're not getting along. And what we will find often is that it's not necessarily about that Jane doesn't like John or John doesn't like Jane. But when we really peel it back, we find that individuals have different values, different priorities that they bring to the work setting. And that things that often get labeled as interpersonal conflict or this person just doesn't like that person, when we really spend time with different parties or different teams that are experiencing conflict, we find that it's not people, but values.
Yeah, they're clashing.
Yeah. So talk about some of the values I think that we see that
The most?
Yeah.
Which ones do we see the most? I would say one for sure is the autonomy versus collaboration.
Yeah. Okay, some big words here. I know you've got your doctorate, but okay.
I'm going to explain. No, autonomy meaning folks who they're like, I want to work independently. I have a way of doing things that work for me. And they get the service or the product out the door in a timely manner. It exceeds expectations. And I like to work by myself, or I like to manage a project the way I want to manage that project. Versus the folks that are the collaborators who are like, let's check in about everything. Let's have a meeting on Monday and then Wednesday and then Friday morning before we head out. And personally, I'm an autonomy person.
I can tell.
So that drives me nuts. I'm like, I feel like you're micromanaging me. Yeah. And sometimes that can be the confusion. That's the clash that's coming through. One person is thinking, hey, I'm being collaborative. I'm being a team player. I'm engaging and I'm making sure we're staying on track. And the autonomy person or the autonomous style is more like, I feel like you're micromanaging me. I feel like you don't trust me. I feel like you're actually making me have anxiety because I'm not going to be able to get this project or product over the line in the time and fashion I'm used to. And so we see that, but most people never work through their values. Yeah. They never work through their values as teams, which we strongly encourage and do a lot of that work with teams. Another thing we see is not having clearly defined job roles or expectations of the job. So folks will say, oh, this is the job. And, and go forth and go on and you got this. And folks are like, I do not know what I'm supposed to be doing. And now for some folks, depending on personality style, depending on background, even sometimes age and generation, that works. But then you have certain folks that doesn't work for at all. They're confused. I would say we see that generationally a lot.
Yeah.
Right? So you'll have certain leaders, whether they're baby boomer or even Gen X, older, go ahead and figure it out. You got this. We believe in you. And then you'll have Gen Z and young millennials like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know if this is right or wrong. I did step A. I don't know if I'm supposed to be doing, like, okay, I did A. And baby boomer, Gen X is like, why didn't you do B or C too? Like, why do I have to keep engaging you in this conversation? But a lot of times we have also seen this with organizations that are small and then they are growing. And they, in their mind, there's a denial around change management and growth and what has to happen when you are changing as an organization, that you do have to be more clear because you have more people to lead. And so that's some of the clashes we see a lot.
Yeah, that clarity is so key. And when it doesn't exist, people again are making assumptions or going forward just based on their own personal preference, their own personal sense of how things should be.
And we see that with performance management, right? So if you're not clear, you have inequitable outcomes and disparate outcomes for performance management. So you'll see, why is this person over here getting away with what seems like everything? They out here living their best life. And you're like, and then this other person's like, well, I just got written up about this. Like, I just got a warning and they do this. And so it's, and you'll see leaders, we've had leaders buck like, well, no, they should know. And they can, and you're like, but they don't.
Yeah.
They don't. Like, that's great, but the average person they don't work well like that. Yeah. And so what ends up happening is you do see a disparate outcome in treatment with employees, even if that's not the leader's intention. And they are like, how did this happen? It's because it's not clear to folks.
I think we see too that in communication styles, for instance, you have a more direct communication style that culturally, your background, just your wiring, you like direct communication.
Yes, I do.
And in some organizations or with some individuals, they prefer a softer approach, more words.
Especially in the Pacific Northwest.
Especially in the Pacific Northwest.
It's a lot of words. I'll leave it at that. I was going to say not always the actions, but a lot of words. And I'm like, we're having a lot of words at TED Talks, but we're not moving. And so, yes.
Yeah. But again, for you, if you're in a work environment, to be able to also adjust and adapt for the person that.
Yes, I admit. Yeah. So because respect is two ways.
Yeah.
And so it's not about you just respecting me or letting me bring who I am to work. I also have to let you bring who you are to work. And so I have to be able to adapt. And you've seen me adapt when I'm like, okay, this person can't receive this directness as well, right? There's always a question you hear me ask, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective?
Yeah.
And sometimes my directness is not going to help me be effective. Yeah. So I have to back in or reverse engineer it, and I'm okay with that. But if I just had my preference, I'd rather people be clear, and I want to be also clear here. Being clear or direct doesn't mean being rude. That's it. They're not synonymous. You can be clear, direct, not rude.
Right.
And in fact, I think it's disrespectful when you're not clear and direct, kindly, but then just say, well, I didn't want to be rude. So there's two sides of that, right? And
it's funny you use the word rude too, because I think, oftentimes within conflict, when these values are at play, people have told themselves a story. Yeah. Like, ooh, April asked me a question about this. That was rude, or I'm interpreting it that way. Because we also see one of those values, particularly with Gen X, my generation or other generations, they really place a high value on title and role. And, I've earned this. I'm dare I say, I'm the boss. And we see, again, with differences in the organization or different styles, a lot of employees and newer employees will want context. They want to know the why. They want to have an understanding of, why am I being asked to do this? What's it for? And why did the organization choose to do it this way? Maybe there is a better way. And we find sometimes that even something as basic as those questions get interpreted as a questioning of authority. And within a certain generation, when I started in the workforce, we didn't ask why. We just did the thing that we were asked to do. And so, again, just these differences of work values can then create a dynamic where people feel like they're in interpersonal conflict, but really what they're in the midst of is just a conflict of work values that, if talked about, if understood, if made explicit even before a conflict happens, can really help an organization navigate that difference more effectively. One of the key things that we are finding in our work is that managers are not equipped to deal with the natural conflict and disagreement that comes with so much change and so much diversity in the world.
Where is the lie? Even Harvard Business Review, they said, look, conflict is one of the most important skills that leaders can have right now.
Yeah.
Because frankly, most people don't have it. And if they even get a whiff of conflict, most people are trying to either avoid it or, what do we call it? The two moms in the room, like the mom style of management. Go ahead and go over there and work it out. Come back out and we'll figure it out when you figure it out, and then we'll start working together again. And dare I say, that's a little bit what I would call negligent as a leader.
Yeah.
Because conflict's going to happen.
Yeah.
And what we just said, folks do not usually have those skills in how to delve in, unravel truth versus
Right.
stories that are made up or that have ran away in your head, and really get into those, delve into what's at play here and how do we get along and work better together.
What we also find, using your mom analogy, be either, hey, you two work it out, or staff that come and expect the manager to be the mom and mitigate conflict between them. And rather than, again, spending that time up front, so that you do equip your teams to be able to work through that effectively together.
I'm just thinking about, someone just told me about 2 weeks ago that there was a conflict, that they didn't even know there was a conflict. They're an employee of the organization that we know well. And they were avoided by their team for 2 months versus someone saying, hey, this offended me, or I didn't understand why that was your response to this. They decided, 2 employees decided, we're going to avoid this one employee and act like they are not existing, or they're non-existent. That baffles me.
Yeah.
That folks would be at work with that kind of tension, that kind of pent up negative energy versus just having a conversation and see, can we work through it?
Yeah, it baffles you, but I bet you it doesn't surprise you.
It doesn't surprise me.
Because we see that avoidance. And I think what you and I really care about, and part of what we bring to organizations, is shining a light on how much money is being lost,
a lot.
How much productivity is being lost. And you and I can walk into an organization, and within 5 minutes, we will have been told this group doesn't like
we
this
know
group.
Everything.
It's an open secret.
We know that's Petty Patty. That's Raging River. That's, who all the players. Right. We know that's Favorite Fabio. Like, what's going on within the organization, even when the leaders are sometimes like, really? I didn't know that, or I didn't know everyone else knew that.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's amazing. Yeah. And so what we find is this tendency toward avoidance, or people just need to get over it. In some cases, that organization is bleeding lost revenue, or they're bleeding time waste that would not happen if they really would just prioritize, sit down, and effectively deal with the conflict.
And most people think, well, but it's not an if, it's when. Because people, if you're in any kind of close proximity with folks, you're
yeah.
going to have conflict.
You and I have conflict.
And I don't love conflict.
10 minutes ago.
Yeah, we did.
Just kidding.
Well, are we? Because, I mean, we have conflict, but
Yeah.
that's because we are in close proximity.
Yeah.
We're dealing with intimate details of our lives and people's lives as we work to find solutions for clients and to do what we believe is making folks better or our workplace better or making, we spend so much time at work. We take that very seriously, that people are having a good time or a decent time at work, right? And so we do have conflict, but folks are going to have conflict. And a lot of times organizations don't set leaders up or managers up with the tools they need to actually lead through the conflict.
Yeah.
Right.
The other dangerous thing that you and I see is when we come into an organization and there's no conflict, like it's eerily quiet.
Yeah.
That it's being avoided so much that folks don't feel safe to disagree. I know we love Dr. Amy Gallo's work with Harvard Business Review as well, who said and wrote the research on why companies should be disagreeing more.
You have to if you want to innovate.
Yeah.
You have to if you want innovation. You have to if you want to have new ideas, new technology, new ways of thinking and working. If you want someone to be able to poke a hole in what you think is the correct answer, when it's like, that may be partly correct.
Right.
However, there's another way of looking at this or doing this. Or are you missing a market share? Or this is offensive to a big market share. If you do not have folks that can speak up and have that safety to actually disagree in a respectful way.
And again, it really is about equipping both the leaders and team members to have a sense of what is healthy conflict, what is healthy disagreement, what are the types of things that can cause that disagreement, and how to be able to work through it. We really like to get to teams beforehand to be able to equip them to know that there is going to be discomfort, there is going to be tension, and how to hold space for that and navigate it effectively so that they can get the benefits that you talked about without going underground, going passive aggressive, or worse yet, having toxic behavior that really destroys and erodes teams.
Yeah, so sometimes, when we're working with organizations, we like to use the metaphor of the mountain, right? So when I was young and dumb, as you know, I climbed Mount Fuji. And I was woefully unprepared, right? I didn't have the right sneakers on. I didn't have anything. Well, I won't go through that story right now. However, what we like to when we look at conflict, we look at it as pre-climbing a mountain. Like, do you have all the tools you need, right? And so when you're climbing a mountain, you may need a walking stick. You need water. Some people need oxygen. You need all these different things, right? And we feel like when you're a leader, you need to have that pre-planning phase. So you do need tools. And we like to offer some of those tools, and we have tools that we use and help organizations adopt and apply. So they're ready for when the conflict does occur as you start to ascend up the mountain. And so that's how we look at it. And then we go, okay, then you're at the top of the mountain. You're having that conflict now, but I'm prepared. I knew it's going to be hard. I knew it was going to be discomfort. But I also feel this great sense of accomplishment that I've made it up this far when I'm starting to now dismount, right? And descend. And so we like to look at it as, let's pre-plan, be prepared, and then what's the exit strategy out of that conflict? Because I do think, and I wonder what you think about this, a lot of times people are afraid to acknowledge or engage with the conflict because they don't think there's a way of recovery. They don't think there's a way of getting back on track. And if they acknowledge how bad it is, that then the toothpaste is out of the tube.
And it's that last piece as well, I think, that is so key. And the research bears out, and I think you and I found that both with ourselves and with the work, is that debrief afterward really does have the opportunity to bring a greater sense of trust,
Yeah.
to build and deepen relationship. That, again, conflict doesn't have to be just a bad thing, but can enhance the effectiveness of the team, can enhance and deepen the relationships when you've worked through it, when you've gotten to know each other better and established maybe how you're going to do it differently into the future.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that all leaders are struggling right now with the world. And as leaders, how do you get around that? How do you get around that the world is literally a dumpster fire? Let me just say the thing. It's a dumpster fire. There's no way to get around that unless you are in a bubble and you're refusing to deal with the world around you.
Yeah, I think I just saw Brene Brown the other day being interviewed and saying, your employees are dysregulated.
Yeah.
Your leaders are dysregulated. And if
You're dysregulated.
if you're not conscious of that,
right now,
you're not paying attention.
yes.
And I think we have organizations, rightly so, that are wanting their work environments to be a place of belonging, to be a place maybe of even respite from what's going on in the outside world.
Yes.
And, I think that's fair. I think that's not a bad thing to hope for. And yet, I think what you and I have found is that organizations at times and leaders have made a misstep by not acknowledging with some genuine empathy what is going on in the world. An example, for instance, understandably so, there's a lot of political tension with immigration, with ICE, with customs enforcement, and companies feeling uncertain, not wanting to dip into those waters, not wanting to make reference in a way that might politically offend some of their staff, some of their customers. And yet at the same time, not having any sense, any empathetic response, any check-in with employees that may have direct intersection, direct impact, can feel dehumanizing and disrespectful for staff.
Amen. And that was just something we dealt with, or we've been dealing with the last couple of months in our business. Staff, and since you brought up immigration and from certain backgrounds, from certain ethnic and racial backgrounds, have said, hey, you know what? This is affecting me. Mm-hmm. This is affecting my family or my community or my church or my folks that are my aunties and uncles. And it's disrupting the whole family. It is heartbreaking to the whole family. And someone just came and spoke to me about this last week, and they were saying that coworkers were making comments about, well, we would serve them. They were healthcare. We'd serve them. But in this case, ICE would come get them anyways and can come in and now they'll blow past those doors and come grab people if they want to. And it wasn't whether the statement was truth or fact. It was the fact that they said this to somebody who was part in the Hispanic community, who was first generation, who was dealing with seeing people leaving that have been part of their family. That's their family. That's their loved ones. Mm-hmm. That's part of their staples in their community. And the fact that coworkers had no empathy in the way that they said it.
Yeah, and that's the piece, I think, that, oftentimes, because companies or leaders don't know what to say, they remain silent, or they don't help equip team members, even in that example, to be able to show empathy, to be able to show care and concern, even if there is a difference of opinion. Even if there is a different background or a different political perspective or a different faith perspective, but being able to acknowledge the impact and express care and concern for different lived experiences. And I think we're finding more and more that the companies that are able to express that concern, to see the individual without, if your organization doesn't feel comfortable making specific statements, and understandably so, it's complicated often on what statement you would make. But more importantly, are your leaders expressing that
Checking in.
respect, that empathy to check in? I know you led in organizations during, 2020, during, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and in predominantly white environments. Oftentimes white leaders didn't know how should they support, what should they do to be supportive to communities of color that were impacted in a different way.
Thanks for bringing that up, because that was a forever changing experience, leading that DEI in organizations during Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery,
George Floyd.
Floyd, and certain folks, let's just call it what it is, certain white leaders going, I don't want to say anything because I don't know what to say, and can we just work?
Yeah.
And then on the other side, having Black folk call me crying, dysregulated. People call me from bathrooms, cars. I can't go in today because my team is acting like nothing's happening. When they literally had a fear for their life.
Yeah.
In their minds, whether you see that or not, or worried about their homes or their brothers or sisters, whoever. And what stuck out to me was the lack of courage. It's not, again, the lack of courage and the lack of empathy some people have. It's not, again, I don't care if you agree with me about everything, and I don't need to agree with you about everything. And there's certain things that we don't even agree upon. We don't agree about, right? But it is about is my empathy more important than my opinion? Can I be empathetic enough to show some courage?
And what for a leader, April, if a leader were, on one hand resonating with what you're saying, but maybe they're thinking, oh, I'm not a touchy-feely. What would empathy look like for that leader who's like, I'm empathetic with my kids, but what's
with my wife? I have to be.
Yeah, my wife, she makes me.
I've heard that. I've learned after 30, and I get it, right? Yeah. Like, what does that look like? It simply looks like, at times, asking a question. How are you doing today? Are you feeling any impacts of what's happening outside? It's asking some simple questions that make the world of difference, that you care, that you see me, that you do see my whole self.
How can I be supportive?
Yeah, how can I be supportive right now? Is there anything you need? And I remember working with a CEO during this time, big organization. And I remember having a discussion with him and saying, some folks are truly dysregulated. They're scared. They had mental health days. I said, can you just say they can take a mental health day? Like, this would be a good opportunity. In other words, folks were scared. Black folks were like, I don't want to be seen weak. I don't want to be seen as being performance managed for this because you're not being a good team player right now, or you're opting out while we're working hard. Because mind you, it's COVID, right? So everyone's also this instability. And when I said to this CEO, he said, don't they know they can take a mental health day? I said, no, they don't know that. They don't know they can take one. They're scared because your leaders are not showing across the board empathy that this is hard, that they're having a different experience than other people in the organization. And so I know I was proud. The next day he sent out a message, take mental health day. If you need one, for everyone who this is impacting. Which wasn't only impacting folks that looked like me. There were people that were being impacted as well that didn't look like me, that looked like you. Folks that right? Strong
Sure.
allies, right?
Yeah, and I think that piece, and if there are leaders that don't have an April in the organization, I think a key piece is asking that question. If you don't know what to do, but you have a sense that your employees are being impacted, reach out.
Yeah.
Humble yourself enough to ask, what is it that they may need?
Yeah.
You're not going to have all the answers,
No.
but your staff will help you
Yeah.
answer
How
some
can
of
we
those
support
questions.
you?
Yeah.
And just the sincerity in that. How can we support you?
Mm-hmm.
How are you being impacted right now? Is there anything we can do? And I don't think you can lead without empathy.
Mm-hmm.
I know some of the conversation right now in this world is toxic empathy and what's too much empathy, and and just put your head down and let's try to go back to the old ways. And I dare say people aren't robots. People
No.
aren't machines. This is the one commodity we have that is so that's so valuable, and that you still have to engage and say, what do you need right now? How are you doing?
Yeah.
That's something that we're seeing. And so we just encourage leaders, just ask those questions, as you said. Just make space. You don't have the answers. Don't promise anything you can't do either. No one's asking you that. That's another worry that we've heard a lot. Leaders say, well, I can't change anything.
Yeah.
I can't do anything. And you're like, no one said you can be present.
Mm-hmm.
Being present is one of the biggest presents you can give someone. Just being present and for that moment. All right. So, yeah. The world is a dumpster fire.